Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Right on Track. I am so excited because joining me today are two fellow podcasters. Please welcome Sydney and Alex from the Little Known Tracks podcast. Hey guys.
Hey.
Howdy.
How are you?
Doing well.
You know how it is.
I'm so excited to have you both on because the listeners don't know, but you guys were one of the very first podcasts to ever have me on as a guest. So that's super special. So I'm super, super excited to have you guys on my podcast this time.
Oh,
yeah,
thanks
we
for
are
having us.
excited to be on.
Yeah, and speaking of podcasts, today we're going to be talking all about podcasting in the music industry. But before we get into this, can you both share your kind of love for music, your background with music, and also how you decided to start your own podcast, Little Known Tracks?
Sure. So I'll share a little bit about my background with music. Alex will do his, and then we'll go over how we got into Little Known Tracks. But I grew up listening to like Radio Disney, ton of different like Britney Spears, Jennifer Lopez. Like that was my early introduction to music. And as I got older, I got into a lot of different boy bands, a lot of different alternative kind of bands. And what I always used to do would be watch their interviews and like listen to their like how they wrote their music, what their behind the scenes kind of look like. So it was something that I always had an interest in, and I love music and I love going to concerts. So doing a podcast about music has been entirely full circle, which has been a really cool experience to now talk to awesome artists that make awesome music. So that's a little bit of my background in music. Because I don't play any music. I don't write any music. I just enjoy listening to the music people create.
I feel like I was probably a lot less invested in music at a young age. It was just always on, so it was something that I was familiar with, but it was all classic rock. So I did not know like even any other genre other than classic rock until like high school, basically. I mean, I knew about like some of the bigger rappers and stuff like that, but I was never big on it when I was a kid. High school, I started to listen to a little bit more like punk and like alternative rock, things that were Yellow Card, Green Day, Paramore, that kind of area of music. And then later in like later high school area, I kind of just started to like diversify the music that I listened to like exponentially. And so people used to, I remember when people would make jokes about like, oh, I'm the first person to have listened to this band and stuff, and it was all like these well-known bands and all, and I kind of would think to myself like, I don't want to seem like that kind of guy who says that, but like literally none of you have ever heard of the bands that I am currently listening to. So it was just kind of like listening to like a lot of different stuff at a certain point. I was interested in music around that time too, so I play a little bit of guitar, I sing, I play a little bit of piano, like just generally speaking. But yeah, I kind of got interested in the process of making music when I started living with someone that we had on our podcast, Zach DeBow. He was my roommate for a little while. And I thought it was real interesting, the stuff that he was doing, getting to actually kind of watch music being made, at least to some extent, on this very like non-professional level sort of. And I think that's kind of where we start to stem into how we created the podcast, because it did kind of start with him as the foundation for the idea to do the podcast, like oddly enough.
It kind of did. So we did a radio show together in college. So we knew we could talk to each other over a mic. You know, we both graduated, both interested in continuing, but we weren't sure what we wanted to do. And we had a completely different idea that was more news interview based, kind of current event kind of stuff. But then we were talking about like this common interest of music, you know, Zach and his process. And then Alex said, well, we can call it Little Known Tracks. And I said, that's it. That's what we have to do now because that's a cool name. So yeah, that was in July of 2020.
Sounds right.
Say.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So that's when we started developing the idea. And then December of 2020 is when we launched. So we're just about a year in.
That's fantastic. I loved hearing about your stories with music and also the story of starting the podcast. It seems like you definitely found your place in the podcasting industry and still going strong. So that's amazing. So let's dive deeper into the whole podcasting world. So to start this off, would one of you like to read the quote I found by Larry Roberts?
The most surprising and rewarding thing about podcasting is the opportunity to work with so many tremendous individuals that I never would have met without a show.
This totally resonates with me. So what does this quote mean to you guys?
I mean, this is something that we've definitely said in, a variation of the exact wording. I feel like just about after every interview, because after every interview, we're like, wow, they're so cool. Their music is so great. Like, what a cool opportunity we have to connect with all these different artists. So it's definitely something that we totally resonated with.
Yeah, that's literally it. We literally just get to interact with so many interesting people solely because of this. And I think that was just like seeing that quote. I was like, wow, we have, like Sydney said, we have probably also said this. I don't know if we've said it like on mic before, but we've definitely had conversations literally in that exact sphere.
That's amazing. And I completely agree. I think, podcasting is still pretty new. It only kind of exploded within the past couple years. But when you think about it, it's a very simple way to make connections, guest on other people's shows, meet people. And I think, I started this podcast in May of 2021, the very end. And so I think, after doing this for about 6 months now, the amount of people I got to meet, interact with, became friends with, and then, led to maybe doing some co-writes with some other artists and songwriters I met. It's just so beautiful. And I think one of the best things about the music industry is when you really dig deep, you can find incredible people with great stories, beautiful personalities. And all these people really just want to come together and support each other. And I think that's a great way to kind of see this through podcasting is we have these guests on the shows that we interact with. And then from then on, like I definitely stay in touch with my guests, check in every once in a while. And then your network just expands from there. So I think from a networking standpoint, it's really important, but also just making friends and building a community. The podcasting community is truly incredible itself.
Yeah, I mean, again, in terms of like artists and stuff, who is primarily who we've been able to talk to, there's just so much that I feel like we would have missed otherwise. Like without doing this, we would not have the like moments and just being able to see what everyone else is doing and stuff. And even like the stupid things, like on Twitter, like if we see people posting like stupid memes and jokes and stuff like that, like even that is something that like I got a kick out of that. And it's like this is literally just someone that we talk to and happen to interact with because of this. Like, yeah, I agree with the networking and all, but it's like I feel like for me at least, it's like the little things like that that really kind of like solidify this as like a this is such a good, cool, fun thing to do.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think personally, I don't know about you guys, but I think having a podcast makes you a more rounded person because hearing people's stories has impacted me in such incredible ways. And I feel like I've changed and grown and overall became like a better person just from talking to so many amazing people.
It's really cool to see, like, to talk to an artist about what they're currently doing or what they have like coming in the future and then seeing that out and being released. I think that like when they talk about, oh, we have new music to come happening in, say January, and then January rolls around and we start seeing all the Instagram posts and stuff. And I think that's really cool to be able to keep up with the artist and then still have that connection of, oh my God, we talked about that like in its early stages, and it's out and everybody can hear it. So that's been a really cool opportunity too.
Right, it's like you're part of the journey from the beginning, you know, because I know you guys really find artists that aren't as well known, which is, you know, the point of your name, Little Known Tracks. And it's probably so cool for you guys to have these conversations prior to releases and then, like you said, see it come to life and see artists' careers start to take off in a way. I think that's so awesome for you guys.
Just like as another like little thing that I have greatly appreciated is we do get to talk about a lot of this stuff beforehand. And honestly, a lot of the time we get to like hear like clips and stuff or even like full songs before they are released, which is absolutely absurd to me. Like that is not something that I would have ever expected, to be able to hear musicians like early works and stuff like that before they're even released. So that has also been really cool, and being able to give any sort of like feedback on that. Like people have asked us for feedback on some of their songs before they release them, and like I do a podcast about music. This is not what I was expecting.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think, yeah, same here. I think one of the coolest things is like that, the unexpected things. Because when I started this podcast, I kind of just had friends on to start and other songwriters and artists and others in the industry I knew, because I was like, this isn't going to take off. Nobody's going to listen to the show. It's just a fun thing. But once like people started to, you know, learn about it and find out about it, getting emails from managers and publicists from artists and bands and duos I didn't necessarily know myself. And yeah, getting sent full albums and like sometimes singles and full press releases to review before was like really cool, because like as an artist myself, I know what it's like from the other side of that, sending out all the press stuff, but actually being on the receiving end of that as an artist, it's really cool like every time that happens.
Yeah, I think it was one of our first episodes that we recorded, because before we released the podcast officially, we recorded a whole bunch of them. And one of the artists was like, oh, this song isn't coming out until, we'll say, January or February, but I'll give it to you and like you can use it in the podcast. And we were like, really? Are you sure? Like this is crazy. So it was like our first, you know, Little Known Tracks exclusive that we got to do. And it was so cool because it was like their first time people were listening to that song was through the podcast. So that was really cool on both like our end, but like having that exclusive kind of information to put out there, but on the artist end as well, that like this is the first time it's going out and people are going to hear it. So it's a really cool kind of back and forth.
Yeah, it definitely is. So speaking about the music industry, specifically in podcasting, being podcasters of a music podcast, how are you finding podcasting as a whole to be contributing to the music industry?
There are like niches that you can fill. Like everyone has a podcast now. Like you just talked about that too. Like podcasts are blowing up. I think it's about finding the niche that would help. So what do you want to contribute to the industry, and how do you think you can make that possible? And then kind of developing off of that. So what we are aiming to do is kind of bring a little bit of publicity and light to some underappreciated artists, while what someone else might be doing is bringing light to the technical side of the music industry and talking like solely to producers or something like that. So it really depends on your podcast and like what you want to do.
I think podcasts are a cool platform for artists because, you know, like you listen to a song, you're like, oh, that's a cool song. And then, you know, maybe you listen to it again. But when you listen to the artist have the ability to talk about the song and how they were feeling when they were writing it and, you know, their technical process or their writing process behind it, I think you listen to that song a little differently and be like, oh, this like, and you get to hear, you know, the artist side of it. So I think podcasts definitely have that ability to be that long form information that people can learn who is behind that song that they're, loving at the moment. So I think that has podcasts are a great way, um, to get to know artists, whatever the niche is, whatever the genre, or whatever the format is.
Okay, you guys both had great points that I want to dive into deeper. But first, let's talk about Sydney's. So I absolutely agree, and I think like podcasting is great for that because when you think about artists sharing their stories, they can be featured in blogs and magazines and all those things. They can have radio interviews, but if it's a written interview, it's not their voice. But if it's a radio interview, it might air on a radio station and then you might not be able to listen back to it. And I think the great thing about podcasting is it's on demand on many platforms and it's very accessible. And I think that's a great contribution to the music industry, because everybody's on Spotify now. And there's not just music on there now, there's podcasts on there, and same with, Apple and all the other ones. And so I think it's a great way for artist stories and others in the industry who want to share their story to get that out there.
You have that personability, like you said, like even talking about like radios and stuff, me and Sydney having some experience with radios, there's gonna be like restrictions to what you can or can't talk about on a radio as well. And so if we're talking about like it being a podcast, it's not only like, oh, you can listen to it, it's there for whenever you want to listen, or if you find that artist and want to go back to listen to it eventually. It's also like they're going to have more freedom to talk expressively about their music or other things. Like again, if you have someone on a radio show, you're a lot less likely to have an artist talking about like their hobbies and what they do in their free time than they are to literally just be plugging their new music or something, because
Right.
that is more like what a radio spot is for. It's more as like a promotional thing, and it doesn't always have to be, but like generally speaking.
Right. No, I agree. So I want to talk a little bit more about what you said earlier, Alex, because this leads into another topic I wanted to explore. So the big thing with podcasting is finding your overall concept of what you want to explore, because there's so many out there, and our podcasts are very different because yours really focuses on interviewing artists. Mine is more of the journey of a songwriter, from the craft to the networking and music marketing, all aspects of being a songwriter. It's not just the craft, and also through the lens of an early songwriter. Because when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, I realized that there's a lot of podcasts out there about songwriting and songwriting journeys that are more from the pros and not necessarily somebody doing it right now who hasn't necessarily made it yet. And so that's how I led to decide, what I wanted to do. And so from a guest point of view, in order to get on these shows, you need to really look at these podcasts before you reach out. And so can you speak to, from being a podcaster, what you look for in the guest emails that get sent to you, or how do you necessarily determine, who best to have on your show, etc.?
So at the beginning, we were doing a lot of reach out just as we were getting started. So our first guest was Zach DeBow, Young Blasian, and we had him on. We had a conversation, and that was kind of natural because we knew him. So when we started reaching out to people we didn't know, I was just scrolling on TikTok. We were scrolling through Instagram, just looking for artists who were putting their music out there. There wasn't like a specific genre we were looking for, anything. It was just like people who were putting their music out there. And we would send them an email, send them a message, and then kind of go from there. More recently, we've been getting a lot of emails, a lot of messages asking to be on, which is amazing. We love that. I don't know if nothing comes to mind of like what we're looking for. We're just,
Yeah. If you make music and you are putting effort into it and you are doing what you can to make it good and you want to share that with people and you want to be on our podcast, like
yeah.
I think even music that we don't particularly like ourselves still has value to someone. So again, we're not like Sydney said, we're not looking for anything in particular. It's just kind of like, as long as like we can look at what you're doing and go, you're like doing it. Like, this is something that you want to do. We see that you have some passion about this. Like, we are more than happy to talk to you.
I love that. I love that so much. And I think that just goes back to being objective about it and not necessarily subjective. And another point that goes along with this that I want to touch on here is a little bit about respect both ways. I've gotten emails, I'm just putting this out there because I'm sure it's happened to you, I don't know, but I've gotten emails from artists and also publicists asking if they could be on the show, if their artists can be on the show. And then they ask what exactly the podcast is. And then I'm like, I don't really answer those emails because it's like, if you want to be on the show, you could have at least done a little bit of research to learn more about it and to see if you're a good fit for it. And so, like, as an artist myself, like, I always, like, do research, listen to shows, read blogs before I even pitch something, because there's a lot of people who have submission guidelines, and then it's also a matter of knowing if you fit. Like, I'm a country and pop artist, so I wouldn't pitch to be on a rock podcast. You know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of people out there who don't do that, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, that is entirely fair. As you said that, there is one thing. Literally that, though. We have had someone ask to, like, collaborate with us and then immediately go, actually, I don't know what your podcast is. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
This was a weird interaction. This was an odd one.
But I feel like that's the only interaction like that we've had.
We haven't had a whole lot. Yeah.
No, like, in the sense of like when we were pitching and reaching out to people, we had the, explanation of what the podcast was. But I feel like people who've been reaching out recently have the general gist to understand what they're, reaching out for. But that, yeah, we did. I totally forgot about that one, but we did have that one experience that I still confuse me to this day.
Oh my gosh. No, I totally feel. And I also think it's knowing the format as well, because you guys do a more interview-based podcast, and mine's a little different where it's topic-based and more, getting into these conversations, not necessarily artists talking about their music. But I think it's also respecting the format of the show, and also as the guest knowing if you fit that, So again, research is extremely important, I think.
In terms of that, like, again, we're not like pitching ourselves to a lot of podcasts either, so it's not like we're researching other podcasts, but I do understand like what you're saying in terms of that, like, having some respect for like the medium and like the people that you're going to be interacting with, because again, like, as people who do interviews, we do research. Like, we're not going to have someone reach out to us, come on, and then go, all right, so who are you? Like, it's
Yeah.
Is it like I agree, it would be a little bit disrespectful to get on a call with someone and have no idea what their music was or what they've done. It's just kind of like,
Yeah. Research definitely goes both ways
Yeah.
from the,
yeah.
guest side, but definitely on the interview side as well, just so we have some background on who we're talking to and what we're going to talk about. So definitely.
Another thing I want to briefly talk about here is the whole process of hosting a podcast, because like we were just talking about with the research and the respect and all that, if a guest is on a show, they may not know all that really goes into it, because we do this for free and we put our time into it, and the time and respect needs to go both ways. And so can you share about your whole process and really let people know what it takes to host a podcast?
Okay, so say we get
Start with
an email. We get an email from an artist, a manager, somebody. We figure out, schedule a podcast, figure out when the best times would be. We usually like to record 2 weeks before an episode would come out. What we usually do is we send a first set of like preliminary kind of questions. So we'll that are all kind of basic information that we use to build the bios for our social media. So their favorite genre, one place in the world they would want to go, who they would want to meet, like kind of stuff like that, just to get to know them. And then we also ask about their hobbies, because that's a big component of when we start recording.
Yeah, so before we get on a call with someone, before we like actually interview said person, I'd say we spend anywhere from like 30 minutes to like an hour on a call, like maybe like a day or two before the interview. We do research on that person or that band or whatever, see if they've played shows, see if they've released new music, like make sure we know what their latest release was, see if there's any kind of thing that would imply that they are going to be releasing new music, and then just trying to like develop questions based on those things. Hop on a call the day a day or two later. And what I do is I set up a folder on my computer so that I know where I'm going to put those files when we are done recording. I open up Audition on my end, so I have a backup of at least my audio. We record on Zoom just because that's the easiest. I don't have like an interface like you do, so I have to. We work with what we have. Not a big fan of the compression that Zoom does, but you know, it's what we got. Luckily, though, like Zoom does also give us like multi-track, so I do have everyone's voices on separate tracks, which is just lovely. So yeah, then we start the interview. We
do the interview. Our format is usually we touch on the hobbies and like what the person likes to do outside of music before kind of jumping into the music that they've either recently released, how they got into music, like that whole side. The way we format our episodes, we have a song for the artist, one of their original songs play. So we usually do an intro about the artist that we'll write, right after the call, one of their songs, and then jump into the interview. But once we get off the call, we write the intro, record the intro, then it goes right back to Alex and he does all the technical stuff.
Which I guess takes a really long time, doesn't it, Alex?
It can be pretty tedious. It can be. I have been like doing audio editing for a few years now, which honestly feels kind of wild to say because that doesn't feel correct. But anyways, I've known it for a few years now, so like just voices is like super easy for me to kind of edit to make sure it sounds good for the most part. If someone's got like real garbage audio, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to like clean that up, and then it is piece it together. So I usually do the intro last, actually, because I'll just record it and it's usually in the middle of the night, so it's quiet. But yeah, I listen through, make sure there's no like weird clicks or coughs or anything like that. Edit out any kind of like weird spaces. So if there's like a moment in the episode where someone's like, "Oh snap, a garbage truck is outside. We need to wait for a minute," I'm obviously going to edit out that bit of information because I don't think people really care too much to know about when the garbage comes. So it's really just a matter of listening to the episode, making sure there's nothing like real weird sounding or like absolutely stupid sounding. And then I export that, do the intro really quick, throw it into the uploading stuff, write the little copy real fast, and that's an episode. But we also have like the social media stuff that we do, which again, at this point I have created like templates for to do most of our social media stuff, but it's still a matter of like taking anywhere from like 5 to 20 minutes depending on how my computer's feeling that day to like actually put the like graphics and stuff together. That's an episode.
Well, for everybody listening, you can definitely hear how much is involved from first getting a guest until the episode's released. It's a lot of work, and we do it because we love it, right, guys?
Oh,
Absolutely.
So I have 2 more questions for you. This next one is, what is a list of things that you would want all guests to kind of know before being on a podcast?
Headphones.
That's what I was going to say.
That is number one. That's number one.
Definitely headphones.
Number one is headphones.
That's my number one too. I will not record with somebody if they don't have headphones. Somebody the one time said theirs broke, and I said, well, we got to reschedule until you get headphones because you're not coming on without headphones.
I mean, for the quality of the audio, it makes sense.
I mean, like you said, I think part of it is just know what you're supposed to be talking about. Like, know what the concept of the podcast that you're going to be on is. If you're going on yours, don't expect to talk about your new release super in depth. If you're coming on ours, you can do that. If you're on a D&D podcast, maybe you shouldn't talk about your music at all. Like, or give the thing that you're going to be on a listen before you actually do it. So you're
And ask questions. Like if you have any
Yeah.
kind of questions or anything,
yeah.
just ask. Just so everyone's on the same page once you get on that call to start the interview.
Like if you come on our podcast and you're like, I think I know what to expect, but you want to like make sure and you want to like ask if we're going to talk about a certain topic, or I think honestly something that would be good would be if beforehand you had anything that you did absolutely want to talk about. Let the people that you're on with know that. And also if there's anything that you absolutely do not want to talk about. Because if I, as an interviewer, bring something up that you are uncomfortable with, that becomes a possibly very tense and uncomfortable situation for everyone. And then like the flow of that interview becomes a little bit less.
Doesn't flow anymore.
Yeah.
You guys hit on awesome points. Two things I want to add are, first, I think it's important for people to know that if you're going to reach out to podcasters to be on their show, to do it in advance, because you guys record 2 weeks in advance. I record a couple months in advance. So if you're an artist and you're releasing something in February, you can't email me in February because I already have my February episode done. So I think it's important to know that, it's important to know.
Yeah.
I just want to, I want to add on to that. You record months in advance. We like record 2 weeks in advance just so we can stay like as up to date as possible with that person. But we also schedule like months in advance.
There was a point, I think it was in about April, we were April of 2021, we were scheduling out into August of 2021, so August, September. So we definitely record 2 weeks in advance of the episode to make sure, like Alex said, we're up to date on the person and all of their most recent endeavors and what they're doing. But if you have something coming out in the spring, please email us now. And then we'll start getting that ball rolling, because that's definitely happened before, where we get an email like, hey, we have this coming out at the end of the week, and we're like, I'm okay, what are you doing in February?
Are you also releasing something like 4 months from now?
We would absolutely love to have you on. It'll just it's
gonna be a while,
just a little far out, but we'll absolutely get all their information, schedule it, and have it ready to go. But we have that kind of buffer time between when we schedule them to when we record to when the episode comes out. So that's definitely a great point.
That is a big one. Yeah,
right.
That's
yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah, and I think this also goes back to knowing the show too, because like we said, you guys focus on new releases. So if you're an artist, you definitely want to be on the show during a release. But with mine, since it's more topic-based, I have guests who aren't artists, so it doesn't matter when we necessarily do it. And so just because I'm a grad student and an artist and doing a million other things, I try to keep a major backlog of episodes. I'm recorded through February. And so we're recording this in December, everybody. So I think that's really important. The other thing I wanted to mention, which is a pet peeve of mine personally, is that if you're on somebody's podcast, it's nice to share your episode. I've had guests on who didn't promote their episode at all. And it just makes me feel bad because, like we said, all the time that goes into it, it'd be nice to, see them share it around,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think one thing is, especially in, an industry like this, it's if you share the episode, it's not like, oh, I'm just helping the podcast out. It's like you are showing people like you are like broadcasting something that is another like personal thing for you. You
Right.
are like allowing people to listen to you on that. And then like if more people start to listen to that podcast, like if more people start to listen to our podcast because you shared it, then that's better for the next person, and so on and so forth. And like again, that's kind of the point of what we're trying to do, is get like, you know, some buzz about some new people. And if you do that, like do you not want that for everyone else that comes on?
Well, it just makes sense to share something you're on. Like, just so you guys know, the episode I was on, your podcast, it's on my EPK, it's in blogs on my website, it's all over my social media. Like, I like to promote it because I was on it, but also to support the show. It's like, it's a win-win situation. And that's so cool about podcasting. You help the podcast, you help the guests, and if we both promote it, we're both helping each other and we're both sharing our own work. So like you said, I don't know why somebody wouldn't want to.
Yeah, it just seems a bit odd. But again, like, I'm
we'll
not your
definitely share
mom,
this
so I
one.
can't force you to. I would highly encourage it, but
And you don't have to worry about us. We'll definitely share once the song comes out.
Oh, wow. Well, this has been lots of fun. I have one more question for both of you, and it is, what is your favorite part about being a podcast host of a music podcast?
I'm going to steal it right from the quote at the beginning. Being able to make the connections with people who, you know, if we weren't doing this, we wouldn't be able to make those connections with. So definitely creating the relationships and kind of building that podcast and music community has been a really awesome opportunity.
agreed.
There we go.
Like, I got nothing to add to that, man. Like that literally is it. It's
Awesome. Well, Sydney and Alex, it was lovely having both of you on. Where can you share with everybody where they can listen to little known tracks and connect with you on social media?
do you want to
Sure. it's so like it's weird for us to be on this side of the question because usually but you can stream us on Little Known Tracks on Spotify, Apple, anywhere that you stream podcasts. Basically, we'll be on there. And then you can follow us on Instagram at LKTpod and Twitter also at LKTpod.
You can shoot us an email if you'd like. You can also DM us on either of those things if you have like something stupid to share with us, or
Memes,
like that's
new music.
Send them our way. Send everything. We love to see it.
We love to see everything, and we will answer whatever you send us.
But yeah, also our email is littleknowntrackspodcast@gmail.com, because I'm pretty sure LKTpod@gmail was like taken, which is weird, but
I think it's because we started with that one and then we tried to do like Little Known Tracks and that was too long for everything else, so we had to condense it. But you know,
it is
all
what
going
it
to the
is.
same place.
That's our email, so
all go in the same place. We're gonna read it, you know, either way.
Awesome. Well, this was so fun. How is it like being on a podcast?
It's always interesting.
Yeah. We're not
Yeah,
used to
I
answering
think-
questions.
I mean, I had a podcast, but being on, like, I think this is the second one, right? Because it
Yes.
was this. And,
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of weird being asked questions. It's an odd, it's an odd
I feel like-
experience.
Because I think we ramble a lot and like
Oh, yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
realize we're doing it until we like we're you know,
Realize we're doing
until we
it.
do, and then we're like, oh, that was a really long answer. What was the question again?
Like, do you see how we just turned that very simple like question into what we're doing right now?
Oh, but I think what was really funny with this is we're podcasters on a podcast talking about podcasting.
It all
That's what
comes
it's all
full circle.
about, baby.
But thank you so much for having us on. We really
It was-
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was a
of
pleasure
course.
talking to you again.
Yeah, you too. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. And of course, until next time, stay right on track.